Millions of Americans will have their plans canceled, whether they like it or not.
They are getting cancellation letters saying those plans don't meet the new Obamacare standards. The White House knew for years that this promise would not be true.
These regulations were known by the president in July of 2010.
We will keep this promise to the American people.
Now, that's just a sampling of the distortions that we heard this week promoted by our friends at Koch brothers-backed Americans for Prosperity in a new attack ad. We've heard how Obamacare forced insurers to send out those catastrophic cancellation letters, how millions and millions of Americans are being shoved out of their insurance policies, how they'll have to pay astronomical premiums to get new coverage, and how President Obama was part of a conspiracy to deceive the public about health care reform. Now, look, there are legitimate questions about what the president said, but all the heated rhetoric is just the latest round in the GOP's multi-year campaign to sabotage the Affordable Care Act and this White House. As Politico reported this week, quote, the GOP faithful kept up their crusade past the president's re-election in a pattern of massive resistance not seen since the southern states' defiance of the Supreme Court's Brown v. Board of Education decision. So today, we're going to set the record straight about those letters. They aren't sweeping the nation. They're going to a small percentage of Americans. Most people get their insurance through their employer or the government. 5% buy it on the individual market. And the notices are going to an even smaller portion of that 5% whose policies don't meet Obamacare's new standards. Now, if you're one of those people who got a cancellation letter, I imagine it is scary. No one wants to lose their health coverage, but it doesn't end there. And thanks to the Affordable Care Act, you actually have a number of options to get coverage that will probably be cheaper than what you had and will definitely be a whole lot better. So to help me break it all down, Jared Bernstein, former economic policy advisor to Vice President Biden, Adele Stan, senior Washington correspondent for RH Reality Check, and Jonathan Cohn, senior editor for The New Republic. Thanks to you all. Okay. So,
thank you.
We've been waiting all week for this. So, Jared, I'm going to start with you.
You must have had a slow week.
Right. There was a front-page story in the Wall Street Journal this week entitled "AIDS Debated Obama Coverage Promise." And what struck me about that, having been the political or communications person in those kinds of meetings when the policy people are making their arguments, is that clearly there was conversation about both what the policy should be and what the best way to talk about the policy would be.
That's exactly right, and I forgot that you had that background, so I understand your insights there. In trying to explain a pretty complicated and nuanced program to the American people, there was a shortcut here. The idea being that, as you said, 95% of the population, or I should say of the insured population, gets their coverage through their employer or the government, and those folks can keep it under Obamacare. It's also noteworthy, and this was discussed at the time, that if your plan was on the individual market, one of these plans that's being canceled, if that plan was on the individual market and it didn't meet the standards, the consumer protections under Obamacare, it could be grandfathered in. So in that sense, you could keep it as well. The problem, and this wasn't stated and it should have been, the problem was that if that plan changes for the worse so that it's no longer consistent with those consumer protections, then it could no longer fit under under Obamacare, and that's the difference we're talking about now.
And presumably from what we're hearing in these letters, it is not in the interest of the insurance companies to make sure you have all the facts about what's really going on.
That's true, but I think what's also the case is you really can't sustain a national health reform program that will be at all sustainable if a group of people has plans that are of the type that are being canceled. These plans lead to a problem called adverse selection, or the kind of death spiral, where you just have a risk pool that's much too heavily weighted with people who are ill. And there is no health reform in any advanced economy that can survive with that kind of coverage.
And so, Jonathan, I want to talk a little bit about that, because you've written quite extensively some of the best work out there about what we're looking at in terms of what is currently covered in terms of the Obamacare minimums versus what Jared was talking about, some of these plans that actually either are not in compliance with that or actually could cost you more for less coverage.
Right. So, I mean, to start with, as you and Jared have been reminding people, we're not talking about the vast majority of Americans here who get insurance from a large employer or from Medicare or from Medicaid. We're strictly talking about people who buy coverage on their own. And anybody who's had to deal with this market before knows that it's been plagued with two really big problems. One is that you can't get comprehensive coverage if you have a pre-existing condition. That's just the way the market has worked. So if you had a pre-existing condition, either a company would charge you exorbitant rates, they would withhold benefits, or they would deny you coverage altogether.
Right.
The second problem with policies in this market, they were frequently incomplete. Some of them didn't cover maternity care, or they didn't cover prescription drugs, or if you were hospitalized, they wouldn't cover rehabilitation. And some of them were just really, pure junk. Borderline fraud. You would pay for a policy, and then it really wouldn't cover anything except maybe a few $100s of bills, which you can run up in about 10 minutes in the emergency room.
Right.
So what is happening now is basically Obamacare says, look, you can't sell those policies anymore. You can't start new policies and sell them like that. Every policy on the market has to have comprehensive benefits, and it has to be available to anybody, regardless of pre-existing condition, and you can't charge people with those conditions more than you charge healthy people.
Jonathan,
those are the standards.
You make, that's such an important point in terms of both what you and Jared are talking about in terms of, sort of those junk plans that we know actually people get kicked off of, all the time. Unfortunately, that probably should have been the message to lead with instead of having to explain it on the back end. But Jonathan, another question to you, because you hear Rush Limbaugh saying, well, why am I paying for your birth control and your breast pumps? But I would say, well, why am I paying for your Viagra?
Right. I'm pretty sure that Rush Limbaugh was born in the normal human way, which meant that he had a mother and a father, and his mother needed that coverage. I think one of the basic guiding principles of healthcare reform, of Obamacare, and this has always been stated as the principle, is that this is about protecting people from random events in life. Well, what's a random event in life is whether you get born with an XX or an XY, whether you're a man or a woman. In the past, the insurance market discriminated against women because if they were in their childbearing years, they cost more to insure. Obamacare says you can't do that anymore. Men and women, we all have a stake in this. We all have the same stake in this, so we all have to pay for that. Now, that does mean that people who were walking around with policies before that didn't cover maternity, that didn't cover those expenses, well, now you have to have a policy that covers it. In some cases, not all, and we haven't even talked about the subsidies available that discount these prices, but for some people, it's going to mean having to pay more for insurance.
And I want to get to that. Adele, I want to play something for you because it was interesting this week. There's a woman, Debra Cavallo, who was on CNBC, and she sort of talked about her current plan, and she was confused about what the options were. I think we have some sound that will play, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
All right. Please explain to me how my plan is a substandard plan when, in fact, I can go to any doctor that I want. I can go to any hospital that I want. I'd be paying more for the exchange plans than I am currently paying by a wide margin.
Now, the LA Times took a look at that, what she said, and it turns out that her current plan, catastrophic coverage, $293 a month, $5,000 deductible, $8,500 out-of-pocket max, 2 doctor visits per year at a $40 copay. Now, what she didn't realize is she could go to an exchange in California, one of the states that is participating, and under that, a silver plan would cost $333 a month after a subsidy, which she's eligible for, a $2,000 deductible, $6,350 out-of-pocket max, unlimited doctor visits, $45 copay for primary care, and savings of over $5,000. And what strikes me here, though, is clearly this woman had no idea either that the exchange existed or that even on those exchanges there are subsidies to help make sure that you get good coverage, not the junk coverage like Jared and Jonathan have been talking about, and you probably end up at a better price.
Oh yeah, this is what we're seeing, Karen, is that this is all about the noise machine. This isn't about facts. this is all about the noise machine, whether it's this narrative that's being put out that, regular Americans who are independent, who are on the individual market are somehow getting screwed, not by, the insurance companies who are canceling their plans. Somehow the insurance companies don't get blamed for any of this. And it's all about, the yellow brick road, and it's all about green eggs and ham, and it's all about women, bad women having sex.
Right.
And it's not about the actual facts. And this is how the Republicans, how they win these battles. Even when in losses, they tend to win because they advance these narratives.
But Jonathan and Jared, I want to start with you. The subsidies actually matter, and actually making sure that people know both about the exchanges or what their options are is really important.
Well, yeah, I think that, but let me say something that is, in some way, is sort of deferential to those who are being so critical right now. Everything that we've been saying is true, as is so often the case.
We like to stay in facts, Jared. We know that.
And I thought the comparison of the pricing that woman faced was very much on point. But let's also consider, if she can't get onto the exchange and learn about that herself and sign up for it herself, there's a real problem here. And so one of the things that's been very frustrating for me is I actually think that the Affordable Care Act, the architecture, the way it's crafted, is exactly right for people in this space. Many of them will find out, exactly as we and Jonathan have said, that they will get better care for less. But if they can't get on the damn thing to find that out or to sign up for it, that really is a problem. So the collision of these two problems has been unfortunate in the timing, to say the least.
Really quickly, though, Jonathan, I want to get one more point in here because, you pointed out that the GOP has actually been pretty hypocritical because what we would get under the Republicans, based on what we know, would be a lot worse.
Right. Again, to stipulate the fact that I do think if we could go in the Wayback Machine, President Obama should have said most people or qualified his statement some other way. So that is a very fair criticism. But what the Republicans don't tell you is that their plans, remember, these are the people who would take Medicaid away from 14 to 20 million people right off the bat with the Ryan budget. They have other plans to take that would change the treatment of employer insurance, and many people would probably lose that. So, they want to change insurance too. They want to introduce changes that people won't like, and they should be upfront about that.
Jared, Adele, and Jonathan, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And when we come back, imagine hearing Ted Cruz tell you that the law responsible for your teenager's murder was actually good for you. It's a fact, Mr. Cruz. You're wrong.